Chapter 5. The fire crackled softly outside Fushi's tent in the woods south of Atur. He sat alone before the flames while the rest of the camp, at this hour, still slept. Looking at the dawn light creeping in through the canopy, Fushi reckoned his comrades would be stirring soon. Their tents were arranged in a circle, each shared by 2 or 3 commissioned Samanik who would be crossing the Great Sea to Jushidon. They had ridden only half a day so far, and had made good progress toward Kyut. If they got a good start, Fushi hoped to arrive no later than midday. Their mounts, tall and strong Ishidi, were already stirring at the edges of the camp. The beasts were tied up to the trees around the tents, peacefully grazing on vegetation from the bushes or low-lying tree limbs, relishing the morning shade. The tall creatures, made of muscle from mane to hoof, had strong backs and legs. Their skin was scaly and thick, some colored red or yellow, several of green with blue splotches on their long faces, and one tall male was teal, speckled with lavender across his neck, back, and hindquarters. The tent behind Fushi rustled. He had shared it with one of the other godlings on the journey, Captain Ledra, the commander of Maura's soldiers in Atur. The tent parted and Ledra stepped out, still wearing his uniform that he had slept in. His undershirt and leathers were all coal black, with red thread accenting the seams. His skin tone was nearly as dark as his garb, and his hair was woven into braids that hung down the middle of his back. A black, wiry beard grew in tufts beneath his full lips and wide nose. "Sharai burns brightly this morning, Master Fushi," Ledra said, praising the sun goddess. "Glad to see someone is keeping watch." Fushi only acknowledged him with a glance. The captain seated himself on the damp grass, joining Fushi by the fire. He took the liberty of adding a few small logs from the pile of firewood nearby. It was a pittance as far as the flames were concerned, but it would keep it smoldering a while longer. "We ought to get going soon," Fushi said. He had planned to let the fire die. "We could get an early start." The captain stared into the fire. "We're in no rush, Master Fushi. You may be, but I feel content to take my time. It's not often I get to leave my duties, you know." He looked at Fushi. "Why is it you're going to Jushidon anyway? I thought you liked it here." He smirked. "Ren has summoned me." "I know that," Ledra growled. "What's the reason? It seems odd to me that she would request you, of all people, not a warlord or a captain. How does she even know you exist?" "You fail to understand," Fushi said, annoyed. It was no surprise that Captain Ledra was oblivious to what Fushi knew. "I am Ren's hidden instrument, the cloaked dagger at her side." "Then why don't you explain it to me?" Ledra asked, interrupting Fushi's thoughts. "You would fail still." Ledra laughed. "So proud the Great Mother picked you, eh? She probably wants you for a stable boy." "Less my pride and more your stupidity that would impede your understanding," Fushi thought to himself. The lowly captain could think whatever he wanted. Fushi knew Ren's mind in a way he never would. There was stirring from several of the tents in the camp. A few Samanik ventured out into the morning, yawning and stretching their stiff limbs. Fushi spotted Jinsu among the first to wake. It's good that he is leaving for Jushidon. His friendship with Tokara has always hindered them both. They depend too much on one another. This will force them to be independent. Fushi had long wished to split them apart, even when they were boys, but that wasn't his concern anymore, he reminded himself. Your service now is to the Great Mother and to her alone. Part of him was disappointed he had to leave. Never had anyone come closer to finding the clan leader, Erithos, than he was. In recent months, he'd made much progress, and abandoning that search was not easy. He hoped someone else took it seriously enough to pursue the evidence he'd uncovered. He'd traced the clan Shilkaitis as far north as Intasa and south to Kyout, though he suspected there could be other cells farther to the south in the open lands, as well as to the east and west. The other clans were harder to detect. He suspected they were smaller and less dangerous than Shilkaitis, though they all worked in concert toward the same goal. The heretics were becoming bolder these days after a long period of inaction. Fushi wondered how bold they would have to become before they would be considered a serious threat. But that was no longer any of his concern either. The camp soon came to life. Soldiers ate a breakfast of what little provisions they had brought with them. The tents were taken down, and the packs were filled. Fushi watched from beside the fire as they went about their business. He was ready to leave at any moment, with all his possessions already on his person. It amused him to see how thoroughly prepared they all thought they were. They couldn't move with any speed, not with so much weight hindering them. When Captain Ledra came with a short shovel to bury the fire, Fushi mocked him. "Always prepared, aren't you?" "I have to be," Ledra said. He milled some dirt, packing down the flames to suffocate them. The captain slung his pack over his shoulder, hanging the tool on an attached hook. Fushi suppressed a chuckle. He stood. "Now that you're ready..." The company mounted and made their way to the tall road that ran north and south through Atur and Kyout. They had camped close by, and so it wasn't long before the Ashidi crunched the gravel of the road under their hooves. Fushi and Ledra rode at the front of the group, not a word spoken between the two of them. The road was broad enough that the rest of the company could ride in rows of 4. The dense woods surrounding them inspired reverent silence. The group rode on for at least an hour before conversation started. Broad green leaves of the Narashim trees filtered the golden sunlight on their faces and glimmered in the gentle breeze. Small Nicolo birds of red and yellow feathers played and sang in the canopy, fluttering and darting from branch to branch. Beneath them, the tiny Kigo foraged for food, scattering in blurs of green and blue as the company of Ashidi trotted past them. The newly commissioned Samanik were scared, and Fushi could sense it. They were not seafaring men. They had heard stories of the sea's wrath, how ships and their crew were frequently swallowed whole. Fushi knew without a doubt that none of them had crossed anything broader than a river, and he wouldn't be surprised if they'd only leaped over a creek in their younger days. As it was nearing mid-morning, Jinsu rode up alongside to Fushi's right. While it wasn't rude for him to do so, Fushi would have preferred Jinsu stayed where he was near the back. The Fenari looked as though he had something on his mind, his green brow tense with thought. "What did you work the courage up to come tell me?" Fushi asked. Jinsu stumbled over a response at first. "I had a question," he said. "You have so many questions. I'm not here to answer all of them." Captain Ledra smirked on the other side of Fushi. Jinsu wasn't aware of it. "What's happened to Tokara?" he asked Fushi. Fushi hadn't told him anything. He was hoping he wouldn't ask. "Tokara is staying at Ikari. Is that a surprise to you?" Jinsu's shoulders sank as he rode, and he dropped his eyes. "No, I'm disappointed." "I knew you would be. Get past it. Tokara must prove his loyalty just as you did." He adjusted his reins. "Besides, you're off to an assignment now. Your training hasn't ended, it's only beginning." "You're saying I'll never see Tokara again?" Jinsu asked. Fushi replied, "I'm saying that you'll have enough to bother you that Tokara will not even be a thought in your mind." To you he should no longer exist. Jinsu looked to the road up ahead. Fushi's words had cut deep, as he intended. Such a fragile one, Fushi thought. The right words could easily break him. "A courier," Captain Lederer said abruptly. Fushi looked ahead and saw what the captain was talking about. A man seated on a red ishidi, standing in the middle of the road 30 yards away from them. The rider was a godling, a Zinike, judging by his dress. A white sash across his chest marked him as an official messenger. Captain Lederer called the entire company to a halt. "Wait here with the Fenari," the captain said to Fushi. "I'll see what word he brings." He trotted ahead, leaving the company in place. "What is it? Why'd we stop?" asked one of the Samanik behind Fushi. Jinsu replied, "A courier. Captain's riding to him now." He leaned over to Fushi. "What do you think the message is?" Fushi pursed his lips, squinting as the captain arrived before the courier and stopped. He strained to listen over the murmurs at his back. The captain and the courier hailed one another and started talking. Fushi's ishidi whinnied. "Quiet," he said to the beast, then looking at the Fenari. "That means all of you." He continued to watch. The captain held out his hand to receive the message, most likely scrawled on parchment and sealed. The courier shook his head, refusing to turn over the message, and explained himself. The captain looked agitated, tightening up on the reins of his mount. The courier shook his head again, insisting, and the captain turned around, making a glare at Fushi. "What's the matter?" asked the first Samanik. "He didn't give him the message," said Jinsu, equally surprised. Fushi led his mount forward to meet Lederer. He was confident of what the captain would say, but he raised an eyebrow and feigned surprise when Lederer told him, "The message is for you." It's nothing to be jealous of, Fushi thought. Surely it wouldn't be. His ishidi trotted the distance to the courier. The man's skin was bronzed and clean. His black, coiling locks tumbled just below his ears, his mustache carefully trimmed. "Who sends word?" Fushi asked, extending his hand. The courier offered Fushi a tightly wound scroll. Red wax sealed it shut. "Read it." Fushi handled the crisp scroll in his hand. He broke the seal with his thumb, unraveled it, and found it blank. He chuckled. "I see. I suppose I'm going with you." The courier nodded. "Tell the captain that he and his Samanik may continue on to Kyout without you. We must leave promptly." Fushi rolled up the scroll and tucked it into his cloak. "I won't waste any time then," he said, turning around his mount. "We'll be continuing on foot from here," the courier told him. "They can take our ishidi. We'll have no use of them where we're going." When Fushi told Lederer that he was no longer continuing on with them, the captain was at first surprised, but then relief appeared on his face. "What do I tell Warlord Talik when you fail to show up at the docks?" Lederer asked. "Tell him what you will." Lederer and the company of Samanik went on, the two riderless ishidi accompanying them. Fushi found himself excited as he saw them disappear after a twist in the road. Finally. "Come quickly," the courier said, turning west and striding into the forest. "We cannot be late." "What's your name?" Fushi asked, following him. "I like to know who I travel with." "You should know that my name is of no consequence." "Of course I know. You can never be too careful." But the courier was of a single mind. "Let's hurry." Fushi followed him through the forest, weaving and dodging the obstacles at a fast clip. The terrain became rockier, and tree roots reached out of the ground to trip them. There was no path to follow, and on a few occasions the courier seemed aimless, having to stop and check his bearings. At one point they passed a mother Junbaka with her cubs. They went on without stopping, unnoticed by the beast that would have mauled them to shreds with her claws had she seen them. They came to a steep incline and grabbed onto tree trunks and branches to climb. "It's at the top," the courier said. When they had reached the peak, they stood in a clearing of thin grass, patches of dirt running throughout. Trees enshrouded the secluded clearing on all sides. "Are we late?" Fushi asked. The courier smiled. "We're just on time." The air around them started to whirl, kicking up dust and bending back tree trunks. It was not the wind, but Fushi knew that. The force of it became more intense as a whirring noise filled the air. "The Intendant wishes to see you, Master Fushi," the courier said, shouting over the growing noise over their heads. "You will be taken to meet the Intendant, and then you will go where you are commanded." Fushi looked up into the sky. It had been a long time since he had been off planet. He smiled. "As Ren wishes."